Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm once again looking at a movie from the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die book, and today I'll be looking at Aguirre, Wrath of God. This was written and directed by Werner Herzog, came out in 1973 and starred Klaus Kinski, and this was their first collaboration. The film really focuses on a group of conquistadors who ultimately are looking for El Dorado. They head down the Peruvian Amazon looking for this particular gold. It looks at how they sort of split it apart and send on this particular mission. The expedition reaches an impasse at difficult terrain. What is supposed to be a 1-week forage and scouting trip by party up the Amazon bastion by a raft quickly begins to suffer disaster. Soldiers and slaves are picked off by Indians, disease and hunger. Aguirre leads a revolt against his commander, and the desperate journey degenerates into a homicidal power trip driven on by Aguirre's increasingly demented obsession with reaching the fabled city of gold, El Dorado. I was really impressed with this film in just like the sort of story, but also the visuals of what Werner Herzog was able to capture. In a lot of ways, it feels more like a documentary than the film. Yes, there is a story being told, but it just feels like a documentary in the way it's done, because we open up on this hillside mountain where all these conquistadors and the slaves and that are making their way down this sort of mountain. We get to see it all, the way he films it. And behind the scenes, he was talking about how people were suffering altitude sickness as well as the animals, and they had to tie people together to get the shot. And it's this quite extraordinary shot of showing all the terrain, but as these people make their way down through it. I really thought it was gorgeously shot in that regard. But yet again, it's another one of his films that really needs to be seen on Blu-ray or another sort of high-definition version of it, because you just don't quite get everything out of it that you should visually. I think Klaus Kinski is once again really great in this. It's very different to the characters he usually does play. It's sort of a bit reserved, a bit more quieter. It feels like a Shakespearean sort of villain in a way, the way he carries himself, the way he sort of walks strangely, the way he slowly is obsessed with things. He thinks he's right in everything he does. And what starts off as a journey just to find this city turns into an obsession for him. He can't stop. He needs to accomplish this goal. He needs to find this city, no matter the consequences to himself or the people around him. And he really pushes people around to force them to do what he really wants to do. And his performance here is really captivating. Even when he's not saying a lot, there's something really interesting and intriguing about him. Not only the character, but also Kinski himself. He really draws you in slowly. There's something quite extraordinary about his performance. He has a real presence. And even though it's a quieter performance, there are bursts of anger that he expresses throughout the film. And you really feel the impact of that. But you really feel his obsession. You really see him slowly lose his mind in a particular way where it costs him everything to keep doing what he's doing. And even when he's lost everything and he keeps seeking this thing, he's still trying to work out ways of the next thing he wants to do. He's a very obsessive and controlling character and a motivator for the men, but his motives aren't always clear of why he's doing what he's doing or what he wants to accomplish. But he's probably the most interesting thing about this film. There's some interesting actors in it. There's interesting things that transpire. What it feels like to me is Werner Herzog's kind of an adventurer and a journeyman in a way. And with each film he makes, he goes on a particular journey and tells a particular story. And I think filmmaking was his way of traveling around the world and exploring things, but also documenting them. Making fictional films, but also documenting the experiences there. Because this film really is an experience. Not only for us as an audience member, but also for the cast and crew of the film. What they're put through in that film, what the paces that they're put through, the fact that it's really shot in Peru, and they really are going through the jungle, that there are these sort of village people and cannibals as they went down the river. And how what they're experiencing is very real, and that's where I feel documentary sort of feel comes from. And I think he does that in a variety of ways with his other films. You know, shooting a documentary but making it like a film. It's kind of interesting the way he looked at the different mediums and how he formed these ideas and the stories he wanted to tell and how he wanted to tell them. Apparently, Herzog wrote this script in 2.5 days. That's sort of how he works, I think. He sort of pounds these things out. He comes up with an idea and he keeps going until it's done. I think he's quite an extraordinary filmmaker in that regard, and one of the great, not only German cinema, but one of the most extraordinary independent filmmakers of any generation. He's just fantastic in what he's able to accomplish with a minimal budget. And apparently the shoot was problematic and a lot of issues happened. And this is the film where 2 weeks till the end of it, and Kinski wanted to walk away and leave. This is where the feud began between these two, where Werner said to him, if you try and leave, I'm going to kill you. And then it was all about them plotting each other's deaths. It's quite a unique and strange sort of relationship that these two men had. But this was the beginning of it, and he forced him to complete the film. And I kind of find that interesting. Just it's a very turbulent relationship between these two men. But this real life struggle enhanced the film's heated integrity. And like I said, Kinski's fascinating presence dominated the film. But it was Herzog's uncompromising vision and control that keeps not horse. There's a lot of practicality here, like I mentioned at the start of the video, them going down the hill and having to tie people together. They built actual rafts and take them down the rapids. And the actors and crew are actually on the rafts. It's quite extraordinary to watch. And it's unbelievable the things he was able to get away with this on this film with such a small budget, but he made such an intriguing, captivating film. In a lot of ways, this film feels like a lot of what Terrence Malick would do later in his career and a lot of the films he's made recently, where there's sort of a poetic feel to it and it sort of flows in a certain way, and there's not always a lot of dialogue, there's a voiceover and some really colourful and interesting scenery and things that we experience and see through the film. It is very reminiscent of what Malick would do later in his career. Towards the end of the film, they build this big sort of barge with this big sort of raft that also has an area where you can go to the toilet, and there's covering and there's a variety of things that happen, and it's just them slowly drifting down this sort of river. As they float down the river, that's sort of how the film happens. It slowly unfolds and floats down this river, and we go on the journey with them. It's sort of fly on the wall, look at these particular people and the experiences they're having. And the whole raft thing is just a fantastic visual, I think, in a lot of ways. It's a very captivating and enthralling film. It's an engaging movie in many ways. It's just, like I said at the start, an experience. This film is something you just experience rather than watch. You experience it as the characters experience it. There's some really great moments there's a lot of improvisation, I think, in a lot of ways. There's moments where they just keep the camera on someone's face, or there's a guy who plays this sort of interesting flute. That's the only sort of music through the film. And he's a real guy who was playing this flute. He wasn't an actor. And I just captured this moment with him on screen, which is fantastic to watch. And I swear Kinski just improvised a lot of what he does here. He crafted a really interesting character that slowly draws you in. He's a bit despicable and a bit obsessive and crazy and mean, but you can't help being compelled by this character and being sucked into the world that he's presenting us with. There's a moment in the film where he sort of not necessarily looks at the camera, but he turns and he talks about how he believes he's the wrath of God and that the earth quakes when he walks upon it. So you can see his sort of self-obsession. He's very egotistic, and his ego is massive in this. He feels he's godlike in a lot of ways. And you start to go, is that really what they're going for in this film? Or is it more he's starting to lose his mind? I sort of sway towards that he's losing his mind and he thinks he's more extraordinary than he actually is. It's just a fascinating film. If you haven't seen it, definitely worth your time. Final thoughts. In the end, it's really about man's obsession, how sometimes men get obsessed with gold and riches and becoming famous. There's a line in the film where Aguirre says that. He says, it's not about the gold, it's about fame, it's about being looked at in a particular way. I kind of like that. And it's really about obsession. It's about how sometimes people work towards things no matter the cost, no matter what it costs them or the people around them. And sometimes they have this deluded idea of what they're going to accomplish. And they set out towards it, but they get lost along the way and they keep going even though everything's failing around them. And it's sort of a journey that ultimately ends in disaster. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe at the bottom. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.